My guest today is Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee, who's of course being feted by India and the entire world at the moment, co-winner of the Nobel Prize for Economics, and also out with a new book that he's co-authored with Esther Duflo, who's also of course a co-winner of the Nobel Prize, Good Economics for Hard Times. Congratulations and welcome. I do have to ask you, you said in your acceptance speech at MIT, I was listening to it, that it felt like walking onto the wrong movie set. Has it sunk in?
I don't think so. I think I'm still waiting for the dream to just break and then things will be normal again.
You know, Indians are super excited that one of our own has won this big award. You're technically an Indian American, and I do want to ask you, I know that you've spoken about how you're psychologically an Indian, but do you feel a sense of dual identity? Do you feel you one is an Indian, or is it like a more hyphenated identity?
I'm entirely, I think, in my own sense of myself, I'm entirely Indian.
Explain that, your own sense of self. What does that mean?
I mean, you know, when somebody asks me who I am, I'll say I'm an Indian. It wouldn't even occur to me to mention the word American in that sentence. It's just not. It's new, and it has. And I was quite old when I got American citizenship very recently, and it wasn't something that has had a chance to sink in.
So how did that American citizenship come to be?
My wife was entirely panicked by Mr. Trump's early pronouncements about how, for example, permanent residents, could be deported any time and things like that, and that kind of thing didn't sit well with her, and she actually implemented my entire application process. She was so committed to. She was worried that I'm going to get deported, and she decided, fine, I'm getting this citizenship done, you like it or not.
So without a Donald Trump in the White House, you may never have done this.
That's correct. I was perfectly content being what I was.
So it's ironic because, one of the big sort of focus areas of this book is the politics of migration.
Yeah.
And because we live in such a sort of post-facts, post-truth world, there's a common assumption that actually migration is increasing, that people are moving in large numbers. And you use numbers to show that actually not enough people are moving. And that is the problem. Why is no one believing this? Why is the politics around this so inflammatory then?
So I think that partly, I think it's one of the things we try to do in the book is make the argument that economists should not only pronounce, they should explain why they get to their answer. And the intuitive answer seems to me to be to people that, look, these people are poor, we are rich here, they should come here. And it turns out that first, when you come here, you lose enormous amount of your social capital. And second, even if you wanted to do that, you can, there's the huge numbers of things you have to abandon. What happens to your parents? What happens to your sick sister? Who's going to take care of her? So if you take all of that, very few people actually migrate unless they have no choice. And of course, that's why we see migration not from the poorest countries of the world, not from Liberia. We see the migration from Mexico, which is a rich country or a richish country. Why? Because in the north of Mexico, we have just kind of a civil war between the drug groups and some of the military and all that, and it's just a terrible place to live.
And yet no one is willing to believe this, and I want you to explain why populism is not able to be countered by hard facts.
I think that partly our ambition in this book, which may well be, it may be, we won't get there, is to persuade people that the logic that they follow to this conclusion is false. That in a sense, the lack of migration is an absolutely uniform fact. It's what makes the US economy so troubled in some ways right now. It's simply the fact that people won't leave these areas where there's been a long-term slump. They still want to be there, and that's what's actually blighting those areas. If they all left, they would all be fine in a sense.
The opening of the book talks about, you use this phrase, an increasing tribalization, and you talk about this polarization where literally it's like people bunching together like grapes, coalescing around their own very fixed views. Do you feel that economists today are also slotted in the same way? For instance, and let me give you an example, you had a Union Minister, Piyush Goyal, saying kudos to Abhijit Banerjee, but he's this completely left-leaning guy and his views were rejected in the elections. Did you see this as an illustration of ideological tribalization, where it's this, you're either today pro-Abhijit's politics or you're anti-Abhijit's politics?
Yeah, so I was unhappy about that. I thought I think it doesn't pay enough, doesn't give me enough credit for my professionalism. In the end, I'm a professional. I, think of me more like a surgeon than like somebody who's comes with a particular propaganda point to make. If I don't care who the patient is, I want the patient to get better. I'm certainly both that and, as I said, very much an Indian patriot. And I want the Indian economy to do well. And if people disagree with me, that's fine. I'm used to disagreeing with people. But I do feel that it's helpful to engage in a language which doesn't simply damn people by putting them in a category. So let's make use of what expertise you have. Maybe we don't do what you say, but why not include a wide range of people in conversations which, they could go somewhere, they could be useful. You could decide this piece of what, this guy has to say is useful, the rest of it I don't have to believe. And I wouldn't take that personally. I think I'm fully comfortable with a world where people disagree with me. I just think that there is some core of that which is mostly not ideological. It's maybe wrong, but it comes out of a judgment about a set of facts and have nothing to do with, what party I supported. I would say this to any party. And I think in some ways, I think the other thing that comes up is I've been critical of this government. What people forget is I've been critical of every government. That I think I wrote one of the few Chidambaram's dream budget of 1997, one of the few op-eds that actually said this was not such a great budget was mine. So
you're
I've
an
been
equal
doing
opportunity offender.
doing exactly 22 years of that. So I don't see why I should be typecast as somebody who has just an ideological stake and is just, or everything else is a front for some
other agenda.
Prior agenda.
You said that you're an Indian patriot whose primary sort of focus would be how to improve the Indian economy. Can I assume from that you would be willing to give your professional inputs to any party or government that asked for them? Or would your personal ideology perhaps come in the way at that point in who you are prepared to enable or help?
So in terms of, if somebody asks me a question of a specific question of substance, which is all that the Congress party did to me, they just asked me specific questions. If we do this, how much would it cost? I would do it for any party. And I mean, maybe I wouldn't do it for some party which is, has an explicit agenda of genocide. But short of that, I see myself, as I said, that's what I mean by being a professional. My job is to answer these questions. In JPAL, we work literally with state governments across the political spectrum. We worked with Gujarat under Mr. Modi. We have picture of, our deputy director with Mr. Modi, and we did a project. They were very actually cooperative, and they took the results seriously. They changed the policy. It was all kind of exactly how we hope it to be. And we work with Mamata Banerjee. We work with the AIADMK. We work with, Chief Minister Khattar in Haryana. We work with Amarinder Singh in Punjab. We have zero
political affiliation.
Political affiliation. That's we want good policies to be implemented, and we would do what it takes to make that happen. You know, I don't think we need to. I mean, most of these questions are not political. We want all governments to make good policies rather than bad policies. I wouldn't, to put it more sharply, I wouldn't conspire to give bad advice to a government whose I'm not sympathetic with so that their policy fails. That would be insane. That would be unprofessional in a deep way. I wouldn't do it.
Now, the book does touch upon the concept of a minimum income guarantee scheme in a chapter by itself. And a lot of people have drawn linkages between what you write about the minimum income scheme in this book, Good Economics for Hard Times. Tricky, this one's for you. And Nyay. And one of the more intriguing questions, and I ask you this particularly because the book talks about this sort of low credibility that people feel in economists, is why there can be a sound professional idea that doesn't translate into effective politics. Now, obviously, you're not responsible as a professional for the campaign around Nyay, but that doesn't change questions about, okay, Abhijit, if you thought that was a great idea, why did it not resonate with voters?
But I'll say two things. Yeah. One is that Nyay was the opposite of UBI. It had all the problems that UBI avoids, meaning it said it was targeted to the bottom 20%. And UBI, the U part of UBI, is precisely designed to not target anybody. Second, it was a lump sum transfer, meaning you get the same amount irrespective of whether you are 1% below the cutoff or 100% below the cutoff. That also is not in the spirit of UBI. UBI is supposed to be flat in a sense. You know, you're trying to, you would want to, if you wanted it, you would try to get it to as many people as possible. You wouldn't want to have somebody who is just below cross over somebody who's just above the cutoff. So it was not in the spirit of the UBI. It was not, for example, you know, it was neither kind of tranched so that, you know, if I'm just below 1% below the cutoff, I just get 1%. I don't get you know,
a flat sum.
A flat sum.
And nor was it universal.
Nor was it universal. So it was designed in a way that was, I think anything we say in this book, it would not be that. So we have a discussion of UBI, and we really mean universal with possibly some amount of, you know, make it a little bit painful to collect so that you and we don't collect it.
Yeah. Because,
you know, you have to stand in line and you know, rub shoulders with a lot of other people who we don't usually rub shoulders with, alas, and we won't collect it. And so our guess was that we could get rid of 30–40% of the people by doing, if the amount is small and it's costly to collect, not everybody will collect. So it won't be universal, but the option will be everybody's. I won't have to go and say that, no, you Barkha, you are the one, you're eligible, but Prashanti is not eligible or whatever. That's not going to be an option. And that's one of the things that is attractive about UBI. And this is so Nyaya was not.
I understand. I understand that Nyaya was not universal and it was targeted and it wasn't giving a flat sum. But in a way, and I'm asking this as a layperson, I'm clearly not an economist, the philosophy driving it was guaranteeing X amount of income to a certain category of people identified on the basis of what they earn or how they're identified vis-a-vis, you know, poverty. My question still remains. It's an idea that should have worked. Why didn't it work?
No, remember, well, I'll say two things to that. First, I think the nature of elections are that you go vote for everything. You vote for Mr. Modi, you vote for each one of his policies. You may like some of them, you may not like some of them, but that's a package. That's the package you get. And it's not that you have a choice. You can either take him or somebody else then you don't get Mr. Modi. I think Mr. Modi was key in this election. I think people really, and he is the only one who projected a clear vision of the nation, of being strong and whatever against foreign incursions, and people responded to that. I'm not sure that meant that they said, oh yeah, and by the way, that thing that idiot Banerjee was endorsing, that's really why I'm going to vote for Mr. Modi. I wish they did. I would be flattered, but in fact, it's not true.
Actually, I found when I was traveling in the elections that most people did not know about it.
Yeah.
So there was no chance for it to actually be debated or discussed at all.
Exactly. So I feel like I'm not vain enough to think that this was critical in that election. So I don't think anybody voted on that. And they're probably right, because I think the scheme probably would have evolved. If they had won, I think the scheme would have festered a number of political pressures and would have evolved and become different. I think that's okay. I think they had to do something in that moment to signal what their priorities are. They thought this was a good way to signal their priorities, but I don't think it was as a scheme. I don't think it was a great scheme.
The book talks about the gap between what regular people sometimes feel about an issue and what economists do. And I was really intrigued by that. And you said that doesn't mean that economists are always right, but you apply your knowledge, your understanding to a set of issues, and sometimes the respondents in your surveys responded very differently. This gap between ideas and politics is actually critical to the way the world is evolving.
Yep.
How does this gap get bridged, and what are some of its most striking examples?
I go back to what I tried to say. Maybe I didn't say it as emphatically as I should have last time. One of the things we say in the book and we attempt to do is to say maybe one reason people don't trust economists is the economists speak as oracles. We pronounce. We don't explain why we get to this point. And one of the things we try to do is take an issue like migration, and we try to explain why. In fact, if you think about it, the positions taken by the economists are not as outlandish as they sound. They don't. I think one reason people resist them, they sound counterintuitive. And I think and until we explain why they are actually intuitive, we're not going to get them to buy it. They'll just say, yeah, you guys are lying. You're in the pay of the world capitalist conspiracy and you're lying. Come on, we know that.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do in this book in part is to say, cut us some slack. Let's give you the argument why we're not. You might actually, after you hear the argument, you might actually be more inclined to believe us.
Yes.
So cut us some slack. That's a strategy. So that's one of the key points we're trying to make here is that we want a more open discourse where economists are not just experts who have answers. We try to sort of describe the logic by which we get to where we've got to.
But when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of something that every economist that I have met thought was a terrible idea, and it had no political cost, and that was demonetization. And I thought of that when I was reading the book, because I thought of the gap between how people perceive something and how it actually is.
So we actually looked at this quite carefully. So there was a small political cost in the following sense. One thing we can do is we can look at the mandi prices, and we can use the past few years to predict what the prices should have been in 2016 in the mandi. And we see that prices are generally depressed 25% or so. Then we use the fact that where they are more depressed in UP, is the BJP vote share lower? The answer is it is lower, slightly lower. Okay. Now, here's what the rub is. Lots of people were not actually affected one way or the other, or actually were happy that the prices are lower. It's not clear to me that there was everybody, if you were a school teacher in by age, you are actually better off, because this year the mandi prices have crashed. That's great. Atta is cheap. It's not clear that everybody was, we shouldn't expect everybody to have been unhappy. Second, I think Mr. Modi's brilliance here is that he understood that one of the claims of citizenship is the right to sacrifice. We did a survey, all of this were a part of a bunch of studies, where we asked people, was demonetization, good for the country, good for you, bad for the country, bad for you, good for the country, bad for you, etc. And the median opinion, in fact the 70th percentile opinion was bad for the country, good for the country, bad for me. People were very clear that it was bad for them. That didn't stop them from voting, because they, I think, figured that they were persuaded by the logic that this was good for the country. I think eventually, and by the time the UP election showed up, it was too soon to tell.
Fair enough.
They could have plausibly thought, yes, it's hurting, but Mr. Modi asked me to sacrifice.
Now we're a few years on. I get that time it was, the election was soon, it was a national project, it also played to sort of class war. There was a sense that the poor and the rich are finally equal. The Schadenfreude. But now we're a few years on, and everybody who's a professional agrees that there's been a cost to the economy because of demonetization. The economy, as you have said in your own several presentations, is not in a great state. Yet at the moment, there is no evidence that there is a political price that Mr. Modi will have to pay for it. For example, in the upcoming assembly elections. How do you see the state of the Indian economy today, and how do you perhaps explain this gap, this continuous gap? Because the old thinking used to be that the roti kapda makan matters to the voter more than any other issue.
No, I think that very, very clearly, I think the focus right now is on non-economic issues. I think the government is not taking the view that economically we have delivered this incredible miracle to you. It's just, so I think this is the nature of elections. It's not, I'm not sure that there's any reason to say that people are still delighted about demonetization. They might say, oh yeah, maybe that was a mistake, but Mr. Modi is a great man. He's the only leader we have of any stature, and look how, whatever, he's received on the world stage. I mean, I think he's certainly the leader that stands out. I mean, there is no question that if you had to name one Indian leader who has cachet of different kinds, he's the one.
Yeah, I do want to ask you though, because there's a part of the book that says that you have an apprehension almost that there will be, in this age of turmoil, there will be policies that will be pushed through that will benefit the rich more than the poor. And I want you to explain what in particular those policies might be for you, especially in the Indian context. And I ask you this because I look at these people who've lost their deposits in a bank like the Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank. It's heartbreaking. Three people have died. 3 depositors have died, one driven to suicide. And yet, I wonder about, why the economy isn't a bigger issue, and what in particular concerns you about the economy today?
I think there are a million questions there. Let me answer only a couple of them, because I can't answer all of them. Sure. One is, what concerns me is a number that is beginning to do the rounds, which is that if you look in the NSS, the mean consumption in 2017-18 is lower than that in 2014-15. That's unusual. This is at current price. At this, after adjusting for inflation, etc. And this is even if these numbers are not perfect, they suggest there's no growth in consumption. At the very least, there's no evidence of growth in consumption. That's an unusual fact, in the sense that this hasn't happened for years and years and years. And so I think that's and it basically did go up in 2015-16, So it's not that it's been, somehow trending down and then has trended down quite sharply. So I think that that's a worrying fact. I think the investment rates are very low. It's been commented on by all sides. I think the government is adjusting expectations. The finance minister did mention 5%. The 5% is a significant way down from 8%, which was a number that was often bandied around.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think everybody's kind of trying to feel that there is some problem in the economy. And then the elections will, my guess is, won't be fought on
economic issues.
Exactly on economic issues.
What are the policies that concern you the most in the Indian context?
In the economic context, I mean, I'm a bit, I was quite happy that the corporate taxes were raised in the previous budget, and I'm sad that they were cut back. That was what, there's the history of so many sudden stops is that. You first react to sudden stops by saying, oh, we just have to cut taxes on the rich, and then we'll start investing and we'll be back where you think of UK and the US, 73 or 74, there's a hard stop, and growth never recovers after that. We describe that in detail in the book. First thing they do is they kind of run into the arms of Mr. Reagan, Mr. Thatcher, and what are they delivering? Oh, we're going to just cut taxes and we'll let things rip. Private enterprise will carry us. We just have not had enough incentives. Nothing happens. The growth never recovers, basically. But the inequality goes up a lot. I mean, that's the inequality curve. Literally has a bottoms in 79. You can start seeing it going up immediately, and it keeps going up and up and up and up and up in these countries. So inequality goes up, growth rates flat. That's the experience. I'm a bit worried we'll make the same mistake. We're going to imagine that tax cuts are going to buy us a lot in an economy where I think a lot of the other symptoms look like the demand is depressed. And because demand is depressed, investors are not investing. Because, whoa, if nobody's going to buy, what would I invest for? In that context, I think investors are smart. They're sitting on cash. You give them a giveaway, they'll take more cash and put it away. Maybe
so you would have preferred the corporate tax to be raised, but what about personal income tax?
I think all of that is marginal relative to what they could have done with the same money. The money that was basically given to the corporate sector would have paid for a bunch of money given to the PM Kisan, double the PM Kisan amount, increase NREGA wages. These kinds of things get money in the hands of poor people fast. This is sort of what worked when the world went to a recession. We didn't in 2009-10. That's one of the things we did.
In the end, I do want to ask you about an approach to economics and to your research that has been the subject of much debate, and which is that both you and Esther have actually argued that if you conduct trials on your own sort of theories and apply them to people, you will find that you're able to adapt the policy perhaps to real life feedback that you're getting. One of the more interesting things you found was that a lot of people surveyed the television mattered to them more than the food. In today's time, I would say smartphones. Smartphones have replaced the TV as what matters so much to people. This has been the subject of ferocious debate, even by well-wishers like Jean Drèze, who see a limitation to this. How do you respond to this?
I think there's separate questions. One is, should we do RCTs, randomized control trials? Yeah. I think the fact that people are buying smartphones at very low incomes, I think Jean Drèze doesn't disagree with that. That's of course just a fact.
Sure.
What I think he disagrees with is whether we can learn about good policies by
knowing that,
by doing randomized control trials on top of that, running, giving some people X and not giving the others the same thing, choosing them at random and then comparing them. And I think that what's very nice about randomized control trials is that when you take a question of that's controversial. It kind of, in the end, people know that at least in the context the experiments were done, the answer is very clear. And people don't argue with it. Think of an example like microcredit. Microcredit, till we did a bunch of randomized controlled trials. We did 7 simultaneously, or more or less simultaneously across the world. JPAL did them. We did only 1, but many people did. And eventually there were about 10 or 11 of them. All of them found the same answer, which is that microcredit doesn't make the average person richer. I mean, the first ones come out, there was a howl of disapproval. I mean, like, we were explicitly, I guess, lambasted on the website of CGAP, which is the World Bank's wing.
Yeah.
But eventually, just the evidence was so clear and solid, and there was just nothing there. I mean, eventually, you see the arc of people. First it's bombast, then it's
acceptance
as we will figure out something else. I think that's the nice thing about it, is that in the end the evidence is pretty compelling.
Okay, before I say thank you to you, this book is co-written by Esther Duflo, who also happens to be your wife, and I use the phrase "also happens to be" because as a feminist I was pretty appalled by the Indian media's headline, which said Abhijit Banerjee and wife win Nobel Prize.
Actually, Indian media was a bit better. It said wife Esther Duflo, whereas the French media said Esther Duflo and spouse and this other guy. They don't name.
So you think it evens out somewhere?
Yeah.
But would you like to say something about the Indian way in which she was almost overlooked? Because I know Esther, and I know she spent years working in India.
Yeah. I think what is deplorable is that the conversation doesn't turn into the fact that Esther would say, I think that she learned her economics. In fact, she says that in the Times of India interview, that she learned a lot of her economics in India. Yeah. And I think Indians should take credit for it. She's as much an Indian economist as most, and I think the French are taking credit for her. The Indians are not. It's a bit bizarre because in a sense she says that she learnt all her craft here. She might as well get.
And she needs that recognition on her own steam.
And she is not. No, she learnt her craft here and not independently of me.
Yes.
She just.
Yes.
That was her research. So.
Well, thank you, Abhijit. It's been a pleasure.
You.
And congratulations. And the book is extremely interesting. It's written simply. Don't be scared if you feel you don't understand economics and you're scared by numbers. I'm one of those. I found it an incredibly accessible book, and I think that's very, very important. Thank you so much.